it's now with, like we talked about, the world changing, the best are leaders and learners. They are both, because that's what changes the game. The championship capable teams are a team of leaders and learners.
Hello and welcome back, or welcome to The Messy Middle, a podcast designed for people tired of chasing external methods to resolve our internal messiness. I'm your host, Andrew Horsfield. The purpose of this podcast is to have conversations with leaders and experts in their field who share personal and practical strategies that you can implement to advance your career, company, and life. You can find out more or listen to previous episodes at andrewhorsfield.com/podcast. What makes elite athletes perform? Not just become Olympians, which is a feat in itself, but become a medal-winning Olympian. What do the athletes, their coaches, technical staff, and systems they're training in do differently to those athletes who work hard but don't quite peak at the right moment and miss out on a podium finish? These are just some of the questions I asked Richard Young, an athlete who's won gold medals in cycling, coached world champions, and created medal-winning programs for 3 countries using his research, innovation, and experience across 10 Olympic cycles. In this conversation, we discuss common barriers that prevent people performing at their best, why simplification is essential to success, how we can alter our behaviour in the moments that matter, as well as the important role reflection plays in performance. I hope you extract some lessons around your own leadership and performance in this conversation with Richard Young. Richard, welcome to The Messy Middle. It's great to have you on, and I've been looking forward to the conversation because I think there's alignment about the busy middle and the messy middle, and I'm really interested for people who are listening to this to think about how we can start to simplify things to perform better, which may be counterintuitive for some people who are listening. So it's great to have you on. I can't wait to jump into the conversation. So welcome.
Great. Same here, Andrew. Pleasure to be here.
When most people think of peak performance, I think they naturally go to elite athletes or senior executives, in the corner office or doing the big deals. Can you share what you see peak performance as in the different environments that people may be finding themselves in?
So I think from the experience I've got, most of my experience is sport, and primarily Olympic, some pro. Anything in business has been through former athletes or people who have the sport model. But to answer your question on performance, a lot think it's results. And so some of the research I was doing was comparing repeat medalists to non-medalists and medalists, and just looking at them and the system they're in. And the core is communication. So the high performer really is the high-performing communicator in the room. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the person with leader in their title or athlete in their title. It's a collective, and they've just nailed high-performance communication. And that translates into a victory at the finish line and results. The results catch up.
What is that high-performance communication? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so there's reactions and responses, and so the people that are the sustained championship-capable performers realize that every communication counts. That we lead with energy, we lead with our words, we lead with down in where we're living here, our mana. And so communication is the core. It's in culture, it's in energy. So there's different terms for how you might describe it. And the analogy I use is a bridge, that everything is a performance opportunity. And if we are looking for the opportunity, there's a different inquiry, there's a different listening that we've got. And because I say the dragon protects the gold, like there could be conflict, there could be something that we react to and we've missed the opportunity. And the championship capable leaders and performers wait for the opportunity. They hold at that little threshold because there's something else in here that can translate into higher performance.
Yeah, and when you're talking communication, are you talking both internal and external, whether it's the communication to ourselves internally and our self-talk and our perspective about what we're experiencing, as well as a team and how they communicate together?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Inwards and outwards. And so the story we tell ourselves, and you look at a lot of the athlete role models, who've come through a lot of challenge, and they sort of rose to the front at the Olympics. I don't know if you found the same thing, but having been through a lot of Olympics and I love these up close and personal interviews, there was so much more about what people had come through personally and still achieved a medal. And if you look back at other Olympics, it's this, tough, will of steel kind of persona people put in. But now people are way more open to expressing how tough this personal narrative has been on them. So that internal dialogue, and that translates. If you can't lead yourself, you can't lead others, and you can't lead your performance. So a performance is a translation of what you know and what you know is needed in the moment. And so that's where, the internal dialogue, it translates out to team and out to performance.
Yeah. What creates the ability for people to see the possibility or perspective in adversity or obstacle? Could you give people some tips about how they could start doing that for those who want to, who are listening?
Yeah. So on the communication bit, we were saying that, in a lot of work I do in high performance and high performance leadership and systems. So I make systems simpler. High performance is complex, but when you simplify it, it comes down to some core aspects that people develop and become good at work and at home. And so these life experience components are vital. So, the old school was the high performer is high performance at work or on the track or in the pool or with the cricket bat, but not at home. Everything is falling apart at home. Overgeneralizing, it's not as black and white as that, but the importance of high performance being communication means that we do deliver it at home. That what happens with our partners, our family, our kids, our friends does matter. That is high performance. And like Gandhi said, you can't be high virtue in every area except one and be considered high virtue. It all matters. And so it's just having that frame that communication, if it's the core, are we ramping up solving problems, driving performance? And you'll know that a lot of leaders with their brows furrowed and their arms crossed, and you think, wow, the energy in this place this is a tough place to work. And high performance, elite sport, all of that, it used to look like that. Wow, this is a hard place to get into, and it's shifting. The global dynamic on what high performance looks like, it's definitely shifting.
Yeah, tell us about that. What are you noticing that's shifting to that more vulnerable or open space?
Well, you look at how the world has changed in 5 years, for instance, and high performance sports. If I come from the sport angle, can look a bit remote, a bit elite from the world. It sometimes looks like that. Sometimes that draws us to be a spectator. Is that with everything going on? Wow, at least this game is still going to happen the way I'm used to seeing it happen in the Olympics and, all the final championships and things. But you look at what's happened. So COVID, economy, war, Me Too, race, gender. You look at all of that, social media, AI. Some of it wasn't even in our vocabulary 5 years ago. And so for new performers, a lot of work I do is in pathway. So new people coming in, new experts, new leaders, new athletes. What they bring, what they've seen, what they expect is very different to how it used to be. There's a lot more awareness. There's a lot more paid attention to. There's a lot more exposure, and there's a lot more that isn't accepted. anymore, and in a positive way as well. So sport is shifting, and so I think that has helped bring some athletes, say like Simone Biles and Adam Peaty and things like that, where they probably wouldn't have talked about such personal, compelling learning and things they went through and performed. And for young people to see that, wow, they're not made of steel. Things didn't go well. They backed out and took care of it and came back. Wow, okay, so that's human. And high performance is communication and fully human.
Yeah. And tell us, one of your core philosophies is this concept around simplifying and being able to simplify the complex and the complicated. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what made you focus on that as an avenue for your work?
Yeah. We're well aligned. Here's the title of your podcast is Messy Middle. And I used to, on the analysis of repeat medalists, there was a part that I called the busy middle. And so where this interest came from, so my sport history is cycling. So I cycled for Canada, coached, and then did some leadership and program work with the British team. And then I've been here. I live in New Zealand and been here working with the New Zealand team until I went on my own, just to broaden the kind of problems I was helping to solve in the context I was working in. But when I was an athlete, I was really into technology, and I was drilling all my components out because I thought it was weight, and I was filling my tires up with helium, and it was this giant experiment. I read everything, I listened to what everybody was saying, I tried it all. I deliberately don't work with athletes for this reason, because I know they're super curious and they're highly experimental, many of them, if they don't talk to their coach. And so I don't get involved in trying to make that busier. I work with the people who work with them or leaders who influence others. So then that seemed to hold things back. I made it to the Olympics, but I could tell performance was lacking, and I was adding more things and more components, and I trained 3 times a day. I couldn't sleep unless I trained 3 times a day. And I won a medal, so I won the Pan Am Games, and I thought, this is really happening, but I could tell how busy it was. I couldn't see that visibly until I started coaching. And then I realized I'm holding people back. Most athletes only have 4 years, maybe some have 8. There's others, outliers, who are out there a bit, but 4 to 8. You don't have a lot of time to experiment. There's a biological clock, as well as, in sport, the day, the time, the place, and the rules. A lot of business doesn't have that kind of certainty, but we do. And you can't be late. And I was experimenting and trying this physiology, bringing this new person in, trying this new gear. Some of the grad work I did was in engineering, so there's another problem, bringing all sorts of tech and gear in. And I thought, I need to simplify this. Like, what are the basics? And started working with I did trim it all back, and had a lot of athletes who found success just by trimming back the program, being very aware and conscious of the basics that were working for them in their circumstance. I was brought into the British team and set up a program called the Technology and Innovation Program. There you go for engineering. That's still running there. That's how I ended up in New Zealand. They wanted that program. And so I helped set it up here. And that's still running as well with in-house engineers. The value of it, though, is the problem the sports were solving. It looked like a tech program, but it was actually a problem clarification program. So when you come into a sport with no clarity on what matters, it is busy. And you look around and it's busy. And you're there with a wind tunnel option, carbon fiber option, GPS, and it's yes, please, yes, please, yes, please. The other ones that were the repeat winners said, no, thanks. Don't need that. We've got recovery. Pillows look awesome, but no, thank you. And so they were clear on no. And the others were adamant about yes. And so that turned into kind of a core focus of what does this look like? And started analyzing the system that we were creating. And the interview series that I ran across 5 Olympics, it started with newcomers. Then there's the performers in the middle, and they're growing. And then there's the repeat championship capable ones at the end. And what stood out were the beginners, the young kids, 12-year-old snowboarders, etc., and the repeat medalists. The yachties and the rowers with multiple medals, and the Mahi Drysdales, and they sounded the same. So no, I haven't tried that. Young kid, haven't tried that. Yeah, my dad or mom gets me to trade. I just love the jumps. I love this, and no, I don't know about that. Nutrition, yeah, they just tell me to not eat so much KFC. It's all very simple. You get up here, Pilates, tried that, don't need it. No, I've got a tight team of 3. Relationship with the coach, top. Everywhere we go, it's like home, really, because we've got a system. Then the busy middle, or in your language, the messy middle. Now the options, they're in the middle. The system has created all these options for them. Multiple people who can give them support, better psych, Pilates, all sorts of options, and it all looks possible, but it's a giant experiment with a biological clock ticking. And that's where the simplification theme came from, was to help people accelerate. It isn't all important. And the deeper you are in being able to articulate and clarify your own system, the faster you're going to succeed, because systems win, goals don't win. James Clear said that, Atomic Habits. We don't rise to our goals, we fall to the level of our systems.
I was going to ask about that around it. Just listening to you, it seems like there's a level of self-awareness that needs to be adapted and understood to then be able to listen to advice, so you're not missing something, but being discerning around the advice that you choose to take in. How do athletes develop that? And is there a way of fast tracking that?
Yeah. So great coaches are the fast tracker for that. One of the most winning coaches in cycling, Daniel Morland in France, and I talked to him after the Olympics. His athlete who won another medal. He'd won as a cyclist many medals. And I said, what's the core? Boy, your French team, they just keep winning. And he said, self-awareness. He said, no self-awareness, no performance. And that stood out to me. And when I had continued with the research, the best were highly self-aware of what was happening to them, what was happening to those around them, and the moment, the environment they were in. They were reading the place and reading themselves. And they all had, I've never come across a medalist or a repeat medalist who was uncoached. So all of them and there's hundreds and hundreds, thousands of support staff and leaders and hundreds of athletes, nobody uncoached. And the self-awareness comes from great coaching. They might arrive with, a great upbringing that it turned into a highly self-aware growth opportunity for them, but some don't. It's a learned skill. They don't all arrive in peak high performance shape. They arrive with what they've got, but the coach questioning, hey, well, how do you feel about that? What do you notice? That inquiry model, John Wooden started that. And that's a key. The more questions that are asked, the better the person is able to uncover their thinking. And that just lifts the athlete, lifts the leader, and lifts all the support staff around them. It's an inquiry frame.
Yeah, I love that, Richard. I've got a couple of questions on the back of that. So one is, how do we clear that mental clutter to give ourselves that mental space to reflect?
Yeah. So whereas human nature is more, that's how we got to where we've gotten to, as human civilization. It's a more game. So more land, more crop, more performance, and sometimes that's leadership and board and chair driven more. You don't hear too many, how about less and better? But really the highest performers are less and better. I often say higher, faster, stronger. The Olympic motto there is it actually, for the best performers, is slower, deeper, wiser. They think differently. They hold before they step into action. They don't hold too long, but they hold long enough to say, is this right? Is this where I want to go? And funny, my youngest son is 14, and last year he showed me these YouTube videos he was watching with his friends called Liminal Space, and they were videos of you could just hear the hum of the lights, and like it was an apartment hallway, and all the doors are closed. There's nobody there, but the camera just steps out and looks and pans. There's nobody there, and hotel lobbies and parking garages, but nothing's happening. And so I'm watching this, and I said, well, what is this? What's the? He said, it's just you can create a story, because he said nothing's happened yet. And so liminal space, and I've seen some other great writing about this too. It's like that threshold. The high performer, the rest are going more and this and that, and they look busy. It looks really impressive, but the others hold at this threshold, this liminal space, just for a second to say, okay, what's emerging here? Is this, and they're the ones who are clarifying their system, because they know what to add and what to subtract. So out of that, research, repeat medalists, non-medalists, a question where that came from was reviewing the whole debrief structure for the New Zealand Olympic program.
Yeah.
And there were thousands of questions that were asked across 5 Olympics. And rarely was the person asked, okay, what would you do next? Like for the next Olympics, it was mostly clarifying the past. So we shifted that to ask in the data set, keep, start, and stop. So for the next Olympics or World Cup or World Championship, what would you keep, start, and stop? 5% of the athletes were repeat medalists, and they owned 80% of the stops. So they were in this space of no. And it was a strategic no, because they have a system that's working. And because we're, by human nature, busy, we need a prompt. And so the book that I wrote on called Simplify was a prompt, really, just to hold at that space and say, could this be not so complicated? Could I actually get there faster, lighter? And that's where it's come from. So it's kind of a prompt, and even research at Stanford proved that. Some great work on the mental frame, the mental model of addition. And so there were adults in an experiment and kids in an experiment. There was a Lego bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's 4 and 3. And so the adults added and all the kids subtracted. So they had to level the bridge, and they made the little bridge legs 3 and 3, and the adults made it 4 and 4. And then when the adults were prompted, hey, you could remove if you want. And this is a different group, but they were just given the prompt. You can remove or you can add. They majority removed. And so that's kind of what we need, is this trigger to say, wow, is that what the best did? They learned this at the end. Could we do better at the beginning with less messy middle, less busy middle?
Yeah, it's such a great point, Richard, around that sense of the hustle and the hard work that people think is the method of getting to higher levels of whatever they're after, whether it's athletes with performance, or whether it's a person trying to move up the corporate ladder or their business org structure, whether it's about being a better parent, fit in more stuff, give more sports, go to more things. It's a really nice counterintuitive approach about stripping back and taking away. My question for you is, how do listeners do that in this complicated and complex world that you've already mentioned that we're in, and there is so much opportunity, so much more information available to us, and lots of our own internal psyche and behaviours that I don't want to miss out. And what about if the thing I'm walking past is the thing that drives that next level of performance for me, however I see that? How do people manage that discernment in this busy, complicated, complex world that we swim around in?
Yeah. The prompt is the key. There's a person I work with, great friends with, and we're in the same kind of business circle. But anyway, she's a leader in culture, and she started this thing, November. No. November. And so she's pushing everybody to say no to what's not working for them.
Terrific.
A lot of our busyness is a mental model. It's a momentum, and we haven't stepped off the train, and nor have we even thought, why would we? Because of the freedom of missing out, especially in the sport world with the biological clock, that actually pushes people into the missing out. You know, what could I be doing? This could be it. This might be it. Whereas when we remove something, a vacuum doesn't exist. It's unnatural. As something will take its place. And that something could be actually in your system already that's squished. It just hasn't been able to really grow. And so it's paying attention to what's working in my world for me. And a couple of prompts is, where do I feel I've got friction and resistance? These are two good prompts for this may not be working. If I have perpetual friction and resistance in a certain area, what's under the hood? And it doesn't mean, because we've also got a problem frame of make that go away. And that clobbers a lot of communication. You know, when we cross this communication bridge as a problem solver, or here we go again. This is our sixth conversation about this. I'm going to nail this one. We miss this inquiry of really what's important. So there's different aspects in our world that isn't serving us anymore. And it does give friction and resistance. It is telling us something. And even if it's something that hasn't proven itself yet, like one of those experiments we put into our world, and we think, you know, that sunk cost mental model where, I've put enough money and time into this has got to work. Well, no, I can feel the friction, feel the resistance. Those are also triggers. Has this been going on for a while? Maybe that is what's worth pulling out, and just as an experiment. And I liken it to a Jenga game. You know, when we're adding, there's a great YouTube video of this couple in the States. They're at a world championship. Everything in the US is a world championship. And they've got a world championship of I can say that as a Canadian. So there's a world championship of Jenga, and it's a young woman and a male, and they're chit-chatting while they're building the blocks, and chit-chatting. Bing goes the bell, talking stops. And now you can see they're leaning left, leaning right, standing up over the tower, looking at the angles. They're starting withdrawal blocks, and you can see them thinking, okay, if I draw that, she might draw that. Then subtraction is system thinking. We think of the whole system, and we think multiple moves ahead. So the more we subtract, the better we see the system we're in. Even if it's not clear to us, it will come clear, and it comes clear with subtraction, not addition. So it's the prompt, Andrew, that works. Like in November, just that prompt alone is going to tell us a whole lot about our system, because a lot of it's squished and it's underperforming, and it's right in front of us.
I mean, part of the theme we haven't said directly, but has certainly been part of the conversation that you've been sharing, is there's a direct correlation, isn't there, between curiosity and being competitive and being just living a compelling life. If it's not on the sporting field, but living a life that you don't have to escape from. You don't wait for that holiday or weekend or end of the day to find your freedom. It's part of your everyday experience.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, the present, that's the self-awareness. You know, it's now. You know, I say to the people I work with, it's not later. Like, it's not after you finish this course. It's actually now. And can you start applying this now, not later? So, and I know you say that in your work too, with your follow-up and things, that it matters that we start and keep the habits moving and pay attention. Pay attention to what's working. That's what, Marlon said about self-awareness. It's really paying attention. We had a lot of athletes who are automatrons. They did what they're told, but it's now with, like we talked about, the world changing, the best are leaders and learners. They are both. And pathway work I do, it's to help enhance leadership and learning inside athletes, experts, because that's what changes the game. The championship capable teams are a team of leaders and learners.
And one of the things that I wrote down on my pad here when you were talking earlier too, Rich, I really like is, for me, it's that flywheel, that the more self-aware you are, I think the more curious you are. The more curious you are, the sort of more capable you become at trying new things. It's a challenging step for most people to engage in an environment where they might be around other people and judged and not wanting their, what if I don't medal in this particular game and I'm seen as not as good, or, what's going to happen to the write-ups or the reviews, or for someone else who doesn't want to speak up at a meeting and because they might be judged about what's said, but then they're wanting to progress in a company, but they're not adding any value or impact. So it's this really interesting dynamic that people have to grapple with, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And Carol Dweck said that in her book, Mindset. Are you here to prove or improve? And so in growth mindset, the best are there to improve. And so they're not necessarily look around what people think. I know it's natural. That's human nature, but they can just be at the threshold and say, I noticed that. That's okay. But my second thought is this. And that's where, Adam Peaty, the swimmer, he posted his picture of performance. Quite a lot of work I do is actually helping people sort out what is their picture, is the system. What is their picture of performance? And he drew his, and it was, my kids cycling, and there was no medal. He's a repeat, I think, 3 Olympics, and there was no medal in the picture. It was all process and connection and activity and things. And all of that, that's what stood out. Look at that. There's no actual result in this, because the best know if you get the system straight, the results catch up.
That sometimes takes years and hurt and heartache to work out, doesn't it? It takes different people, different timeframes, but it's a superpower. Once you work it out, it would be your experience as well. It becomes a superpower for life, not just when we're competing, right?
That's right. And not just when we're winning either, because that becomes a challenge. I call it winner's bloat, there's a lot of people who've won a lot and you look around and their system hasn't changed. And on the surface, you'd think, well, of course it hasn't changed because look, they're winning. But experts and masters, I talked to the Dreyfus brothers about this. I had the great fortune of meeting them a few times. They had done the research at Berkeley, UC Berkeley, on novice to expert spectrum. And when I was in this repeat medalist frame and the research, and I tested it with them, and they were sport fanatics, and they said, sure, come on to California, let's talk about your data. And so I said, they were into masters at that point. And I said, what's the difference between an expert and a master? And it was funny because we were at out for lunch, and Hubert was having soup, and he just spooning the soup, and so I asked, and there was pause and no answer yet, and his brother said, Hubert, he's asked you a question about the difference between a master and an expert, and he has 3 more scoops of soup, and he looks at his brother and he said, he wants the right answer, not any answer. Then he said, a master has fewer blind spots. And I thought, there's gold. And from what you're saying there about, the momentum and what people think, and especially when we've had a frame of winning quite a bit, there's a lot of blind spots that come from that. And then you add in people who come from other sports or other areas, and they've won a certain way, and they try to carry that in, but the system just doesn't, it just doesn't work. It actually doesn't fit. I know it worked over there, but it doesn't work here. Do you know why? Yeah, but it worked over there. How can it not work? That's my forte. That's what I used to do over there. Well, it doesn't fit here. And so the more we're into system, the easier we're into subtract, because we start to see a collective. It's not just us and our stuff. It's us and our collective. And that's why working all of this at home is so important.
You've talked about that system and subtraction and how important it is. Could you offer any advice for people listening, sort of nodding their head in the car on the treadmill, saying, "Yeah, I like this." How do they start to focus on what matters and doesn't for themselves?
Yeah. I used to laugh at the cliche, "Get the basics straight," and then my second question was, "What are the basics?" Oh, it depends. And so most of the time, that's the answer you get. But the best in the game can describe the basics. They can describe what works. So like Mahe Drysdale, he was asked about innovation. And he said, "Oh, innovation for me only happens because I know what works. I can always go back to that." So it's actually a picture of what works for you, what works for the system you're in. And you can't measure what you can't see, and you can't see what you can't measure. So it starts with a picture. And I often call it a picture of performance, which is really the basics in a list or a mind map. But what works for you? What is delivering performance for you? And it's surprising how many people have never done that. So they've just got a sense that I know what's working. I keep doing stuff, but actually I have no frame. I have no simple, Mark Twain, he wrote to his wife and said, "I wrote you a long letter because I didn't have time to write you a short one." And like in research, that executive summary, the abstract, is the hardest part. And it's doing that, sitting still and drawing out our picture of performance. It is a game changer for what's actually working for me. And that's what struck me, say, Adam Peaty, in your question there. It's a picture. It sounds very basic, but it puts the basics into a shape that we can see. And then, like Mahe said, we know what to go back to. We can leave, we can add, we can do what we need, but we know what works. We can know what, and we know why it works.
What I like about what you're saying is, one, having that plan to go back to call on is really important, and sometimes very much underrated by people.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, even when they start to write it down, I'd imagine that what they write down and then what's iterated to be the thing that actually is the plan versus what they thought were the plan. Is there a gap between that sort of first iteration or the first attempt and then the iterated final example?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this isn't a done thing. Yeah, the great point, because this is an emerging process. We may have it completely wrong first go because we've never done this before. But if we're curious, like you mentioned at the start, that's the key. And the self-awareness of, wow, wouldn't it be cool if I could actually put a picture of what's working for me? What's delivering my performance? And then you're right. You start to, once your system has at least a picture to it, you listen to what other people say in a different way. You start to inquire into their system. And the system is just people, places, and things and how they interact. That's all it is. That's why a home is so important. It's not a CRM or a database or GPS measures or anything. It's biological. And that's a learning system. It's people, places, and things. And so if we can describe it, we're miles ahead of people still in the addition game. And those repeat medalists at the end could describe it. And they sounded the same. If they were on a team, the actual way they described it was the same language. They had alignment on what mattered, why it mattered, and how it connected and how they connected to it. And what was the vital bridge was they knew their own system. So they weren't just part of a team. They knew how they fit. Like a lot of teams, everyone I work with, I start at values. So I have a way of a process I use to uncover values. And then we start there. And a lot of teams go straight to values, and you'll see it on the board, honesty, integrity, and people can talk about that. But what's missed often is my personal connection to that. That actually I've got a lot of life before I came to this team. I have my own values, and you know what? No one's actually asked about that. And I get that, but I don't know how I connect mine. Competition, I'm more into a different way of operating. I know I'm competing here in this team, but that's not my main driver for me personally. And there are ways to connect. but they have to be clear. So that picture of my values, team values, then we start to connect. And that turned out to be a difference in these repeat medalists. They could describe, articulate, and even draw it, some of them, the picture of performance. It wasn't some enigma out there they couldn't quite describe.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit more about that, around how that works for the individual in the team connecting into the broader team? Because I'm thinking about, different strengths and skills and, as you say, life experience and upbringings that shape who we are as people, and how that system and painting that picture all collaborates to harness the collective.
With teams, sport, business, it's all family. It's a fully human connection game we're in. And there's a great interview with a South African rugby coach, and he said, the coach gets the best out of us because he knows us. He knows our village, he knows our families, he knows our history, he knows our struggles, what we've been through. That is a different cohesion. And there's a great book written by a Kiwi who lives in Britain called Belonging. And fantastic book. And it talks a lot about that our lived experience is key. And so what we bring in, that is diversity. It isn't the what it looks like on the surface and where we were born and the religion we follow or the gender we were born. It's our lived experience. And the best teams are crystal clear on the diverse lived experience that people bring. Then they see the world differently. They see problems differently. They can solve stuff, and the whole team collectively lifts. And that's the awesome part of team sport, isn't it? Like, you never know who's going to show up. You know their names, but you never know. Is this going to be that rocket team from a few weeks ago, or is this dud team? And so they can more often lift when they have this cohesion, unity, and that comes from, we know who you are.
Mm.
And a lot of teams aren't like that. Michael Owen talked about that, when he shifted out of Liverpool. Where'd he go to? Manchester. And he said he was recognized as a great player, but he wasn't recognized for his history, for who he was. He felt like he was there as a performer, but not a person. And it caused him a lot of performance challenge too. So it's high leverage that we're in the communication, people knowing game.
Yeah. How do leaders who are listening thinking, look, that's great, but I've got pressure about results, I've got pressure about outcomes, we've got deadlines we need to meet. So there's this push and edge for performance in the short term, but what you're talking about is hugely beneficial for long-term sustainable results. How do people strike that balance within the current leadership roles that they may be sitting in?
So a lot of it is the frame that it's all up to me. And leaders and coaches come in with this pressure that it's up to me. And us, as parents, you get that all the time. This is here it comes another psychological moment. No, it's not. Actually, it's okay. And what if I just uncovered thinking, what if the solution is on the other side? What if that person actually has the solution and I'm not at this threshold of liminal space looking for it? I'm in problem mode. I'm in fourth conversation again. I'm in pressure. The board's on me. Finance is cut. All of that impacts our intent in this performance conversation. So it's more simple and productive to just be an inquiry frame, less pressure, because there's empowerment and transformation that actually comes from the other person and the other side of the bridge on this analogy. It's not from me, and there's a lot of heat on leaders to be the one, from head coaches to be the one. And it's not. So the best have a distributed decision-making. There's a collective. That's what's empowering. It's a whole group, a system, people, places, things, how they interact. The whole group is lifted. And the inquiry has been a catalyst in this, helping people uncover their thinking. Because if we've got a frame like that, you just hear a different pace. Like, for instance, my son, he had a little hat on, came down in summer and last year, and he came down with a hat with little bear ears. It's a bear hat he had. And I said, why have you got a hat on? It's roasting outside. And I could see his posture shift. He said, well, we're just meant to dress up today at school. And I said, oh, what made you choose the bear hat? He said, oh, it's mascot day. So I thought I'd go as a bear. And this is my favorite hat because Auntie Caroline bought me this. So suddenly less tension, less defense, productive, same situation, but the inquiry, and that's what I say is and Argyris, Chris Argyris was the one who looked at the Model 1, Model 2 thinking. Model 1 is defensive. I have to defend my position. It typically comes from a why. Why are you doing this? Like in a debrief. Why'd you pass the ball right? She was open on the left. I don't know. I saw the tackle come. I didn't know. How did you choose to pass right? Oh, well, she always catches the ball. And I just had a feeling something was happening on the. So we get a different insight, less pressure, and it points to something. Like for Leo, my son, I saw the system. I could see what his day was looking like at school. I could see his change in demeanor. And I hadn't done anything but just changed my inquiry. And then it's over to him, and off he went to school. And in that debrief, the girl went from the player, she went from, I blew it, to, oh yeah, I read that. Under the circumstance, I'd probably do that again, but I just need to open up to what's happening on the peripheral left. And so she had something productive that came from that. And right after that question was asked.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would offer people listening who are really enjoying what you're saying? Is there a natural starting point or something where you would give people just an action to start to enter into this world of just seeing systems, looking for less complexity and more, it's not simplicity necessarily, but simplification in a way, or simplifying the way they're looking at things?
A simple frame is the analogy of inquiry that we were just talking about. So all performance comes from inquiry. It comes from a collective understanding of the system we're in. And it needs to start with somebody, which is us. And so we lead our world in the system we're in, whether we like it or not. We do, because our energy has impact and our questioning has impact. So even that Argyris frame that we talked about, they were asking more what and how in our conversations, just to get in the pattern of uncovering people's thinking. And we start to get a visual. Like Jenga, we start to see interconnections, and we do that with enough people in our world. We start to see something about the system we're in as well. It does start with those two questions. It takes us into an inquiry frame that we may not have. We may be, without knowing it, have totally different mental models, and we're concealing stuff that could be to our advantage.
Thank you, Richard. Before we go, where can people find you, buy the book, explore these ideas with you further? How do they find you and get in touch?
Yeah, sure. So there's a website, either richardnyoung.com or simplify2perform.com. And I write quite a bit. So there's a newsletter every week. So the website, if anybody wants to subscribe, it's a lot like our conversation here, Andrew. And so there's LinkedIn as well. They're the only two places I'm at. And on the website has the work I do and the challenges that I help solve for people.
Brilliant. Look, thank you. It's nice to move our mental furniture around performance and progress and how we do that, and how subtraction and simplification can be one of those keys, as opposed to more and busier and faster and more hustle, as opposed to a little bit more considered and curiosity in the way that we go about our work. So thanks for coming on and having the conversation and giving us lots to think about. It's been great talking with you.
Yeah, same to you, Andrew. Same to you.
2 quick things before we wrap up. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to access the full list of show notes or explore some other episodes, simply visit andrewhorsfield.com. And please consider forwarding this episode to someone that you think would benefit. It will not only be appreciated by the person you choose, but help spread the word and amplify the impact I'm trying to make for the podcast. Thanks for listening.